Hi guys, I'm Erin Hernandez and I'm going to show you my technology-infused lesson plan. I had to choose my own population because Union High School did not have the resources for this project. I chose Forest Hills Northern High School, which is, as you can see, a largely white population. It is not very diverse. It is fairly even in terms of gender, male and female, and I did have to create the conditions I had to kind of assume based off of prior knowledge and just my own experience that this would be an advanced art class. So it would be only available to upperclassmen 16 to 18 years old after they had completed the introductory courses of Art 1 and Intro to Technology at the very least. And like I said, this school would be very highly resourced with a computer lab, Adobe Photoshop programs, and an Adobe capable computer like some kind of Mac. So the rationale for this project, graphic design is really high demand and it's fast growing, and a lot of students just aren't exposed to it. Computers and online programs are also really important to art making, and in general they're kind of pushed aside in high school in favor of the traditional craft. So I want to change that and expose these kids to these art making mediums. I'll be doing color theory, art history, and surrealism through a new medium. So sorry for the long standards. I do have 5 art standards, which are basically using materials with intention, using art to evoke emotion, relating again to color theory, evaluating an artist's intent, self-evaluation for successful composition, and using art history to create personal work. And then I have 2 technology standards, which are respecting digital rights and property, and then effective research strategies. So the steps for this project, I'd start with an introduction PowerPoint that would explain surrealism and the history behind it, as well as what color theory is. I would introduce this with visual thinking strategy. So, for instance, with the photo on the right, I would ask things, open-ended questions like, what do you think is happening here? Why? What about this picture leads you to that conclusion? So really specific questions wouldn't work here. It would be very open-ended, and the students would have to kind of lead the discussion. I would include images from art history, so other surrealist artists, and then the motivational artist, the main artist for this project is Sandy Skokeland, which is the artist of the picture on the right. And this relates really well to not only the 5th standard that I had, which is using art history to create personal work, as we're tying surrealism back into our project. And then also the 3rd art standard, which is to evaluate an artist's intent with the visual thinking strategy. Then I will be doing a demonstration on effective research strategies, so keywords, advanced searches, and how to check sources, things like that. I'll project that on I'll project my computer screen so that they can follow along, and then I will assign them a Flipgrid presentation of a surrealist artist of their choosing. They will have to research with the techniques that I had showed them, and then present that using Flipgrid. So that is hitting, again, evaluating an artist's intent, that 3rd art standard, and then just using the Flipgrid to be able to present that and see everybody else's work. And then I have step 3, a digital citizenship lecture and demonstration. So I would be showing the students the importance of intellectual property and how to identify copyrights. So I'd be using Creative Commons to show them how to find free images, free use images, and then there in class we would find a free use image as their background for the project base. So then step 4 is the actual Photoshop part, where I introduce the actual Photoshop. Students will take a photo of themselves or students, will take photos of each other, and then they will be using that photo to layer onto the base image that we found previously with our Creative Commons. They will be watching a demonstration from me as I project my computer screen, showing them how to cut things out, to layer and duplicate, things like that. And then we will be altering the colors because, as you can see again on the image on the right, the colors are drastically altered to be able to evoke emotion, which is going right back to that number 2 standard, using art to evoke emotion, and again with surrealism, using art history to create personal work, and then hitting that art 1 standard, which would be using materials with intention. So creating a personal narrative through Photoshop, which would be the main objective of this project. So then we have, after that, everyone's done with their project, we're doing a think, pair, share, and an artist statement. So for the think, pair, share, students would pair up to discuss their partner's pieces. So does it follow surrealism? How do you know? How do all of these objects, yourself and the background, connect? And then for the artist statement, students will self-reflect on their own piece and how successful it is and if it met its criteria. So for the description here, I've used PowerPoint to introduce the lesson, which amplifies the lesson as it is more efficient in giving the information, and it's easily changed from slide to slide. There's no writing on the board or anything like that. This also is really important for art lessons as it allows for a lot of high resolution photographs, so that I can prompt discussion and aid in understanding a lot of art history examples and relevant modern examples. So then I'm using Google Scholar, which we use to conduct the research for the surrealist artists, which again amplifies this lesson because it is a lot easier to find accurate and relevant information using an online source rather than looking things up in physical books or any kind of encyclopedia or anything like that. And then we have the Flipgrid assignment, which is used to present the researched information. I said that this technology amplifies the lesson because it lets students practice their presenting and efficiently see each other's contributions. With this Flipgrid assignment, we wouldn't have to actually take class time out to just present these things. They can peruse at their own leisure outside of class on their own time. And then we have the Creative Commons, which we use to identify and learn about appropriate images and copyrights and things like that. The technology transforms this lesson because it would be impossible to find and request access or identify copyrights based off of just being able to do it physically would be impossible, and I'd have to scrap it. So I argued that it transforms the lesson. It adds a new thing that I could do within this lesson. And then we used Photoshop, which I also argued transforms this lesson because it's a new way that the art can be made. And even though you can create a physical collage with cutting and gluing and things like that, you can't affect size or shape. The scale would be set. And so I argued that this is a new way to create art, and so it transforms. And then finally, we used Microsoft Word for the artist statement, which I also argued amplifies the lesson because typing is a little bit more efficient and it's way easier to cite your sources on Microsoft Word than it is to simply by writing on a paper. So I didn't actually get to do this lesson with students, but from my own knowledge, I guess, and just from what I learned trying to create this lesson, students are more engaged in art history when it's more relevant to their own lives. So with pop culture and media today, so graphic design is a little bit more intriguing to them generally than really old Renaissance paintings. And then introducing graphic design programs and techniques early generate interest and make the field a little bit more approachable. It allows them to be able to see themselves in that field. And then necessitating that they need to put themselves, physically, the image of themselves, into their artwork can create a further personal connection. So in conclusion, I would love to do this lesson, but like I said, it does need to be in a school with a lot of resources. It demands a lot of expensive programs and technology. Chromebooks would not be able to do this. It would need to be a pretty expensive computer, and I'd need to have it for every single student. I would also like to do this as a larger lesson plan surrounding the Adobe Suite programs, and so I'd want to delve a little bit more into my own Photoshop knowledge and the Adobe Suites, because right now my knowledge is pretty basic, which would work for this basic lesson plan introducing Photoshop, but if I wanted to do a larger unit plan, I would need to know a little bit more, and I think it is important if I'm trying to introduce graphic design to these students that they get a full scope of the programs.